Good morning, and you are very welcome to the ICO's Data Protection Practitioners Conference 2022. I'm Andrew Rimmer from the Commissioner's Private Office team. I am told my connection is a bit juddery in the heat, but hopefully you can hear me or see the live captions to follow along this morning. We are delighted to have you virtually here today. This is a new time for the ICO. We have a new commissioner. We have a new strategy as set out in the ICO 25 plan, which you'll hear about throughout the day. And we have new resources available to you. There's new training modules on both UK GDPR and FOI up right now on our website. Simply visit ico.org.uk/training. So we are back online for this conference for a second year, streaming right now to your desks at your home or office. And with COVID levels so high and record temperatures expected today, you're probably glad to be dialing in rather than sweating on a train up and down the country to Manchester. Today is going to be a scorcher. London could hit 40 degrees, Cardiff 31, Edinburgh 30, Manchester and Wilmslow 36. But Belfast is a positively chilly 23 degrees. There's even rain forecasts along the North Antrim coast. So if you need to cool off later, head to Giant's Causeway. But whether you're in the office or at home, please now gather together your DPPC 2022 Conference Survival Pack. You will need 1, a fan, 2, some water, and 3, a high tolerance for acronyms and initialisms throughout the day. For this is the place to hear more on DPIAs, BCRs, IDTAs, and don't worry, there is a rarely known provision in the UK GDPR that says you can watch this conference whilst wearing your shorts. So our conference today builds on conversations during our listening tour. And you can have conversations with each other throughout the day on our meeting hub. To let you know, any information you put on the hub is not recorded or retained, just used for the purposes of the chat today. The hub will be open until 4:30 today. You'll also get an email in the next couple of days from our events team with a feedback survey. Please do fill those in. Feedback helps us build a better conference, arrange speakers, panels and sessions that will better help you do your vital work. As I mentioned, we've also got the ICO's new strategy published online, so please check out ico.org.uk/ICO25. The plan is out now for a 10-week consultation before final publication, so we want your views and input to help it succeed. And you can keep your comments coming throughout the day on social media with the hashtag DPPC2022 on Twitter. Let us know what you're enjoying about the day and how you're coping with the extreme weather. So let's have a look at what's coming up today. At 9:40, the conference will commence with a keynote speech from Information Commissioner John Edwards. John will outline his experiences 7 months into the role and how he wants to make practitioners' lives easier. At 9:55, we're pleased to be joined by this year's guest speaker, Marcel Bou, Chief Executive of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. He will talk about being a values-driven organisation and the ethical challenges AI and other technology brings to society. We'll have a short comfort break before returning at 10:25 for the Ask the ICO panel. We've asked questions you've sent in before this conference to members of the ICO's executive team. We'll assemble back here at 11:35 to end the morning session with a panel discussion with data protection officers from across the UK and all manner of sectors, giving you insights that you might recognise. Commissioner John Edwards will ask the DPOs questions, but the DPOs may put him in the hot seat too. Then at 12:45, what better way to eat your sandwiches than with a bite-sized lunchtime seminar on transfer risk assessments and some more virtual networking. Then from 1:45, the afternoon is packed with practical seminars. There's lots to choose from, and if you miss one, all of them will be available through the website you're logged into now for a limited period. So let's get the day underway as we welcome to the virtual stage for his keynote speech, the Information Commissioner, John Edwards. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Andrew. What a wonderful introduction. Feel free to take that tie off in light of the heat. Kia ora, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. We had 4,000 sign up, I think, for this session, and we already have around about 2,000 on the call. I should be intimidated by those numbers and feeling nervous, but I don't. I feel like I'm among my own people. I've done what you do. I share your quirky obsession with privacy and data protection. I've been doing this work for over 30 years. When I first started practicing law, I advertised as specializing in information law. I don't think anyone else in the world described themselves in that way at that time, so it's no wonder no one knew what the hell I was talking about. I came to my first privacy law and business conference in Cambridge in 1995. I was invited to attend this event in 2020 when I was supposed to be delivering the keynote as New Zealand Commissioner, but the pandemic put paid to that, along with so much else. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying how wonderful it is to be here as your Information Commissioner and to be able to bring this UK data protection community together in this way. I want to talk to you this morning about my plans for the ICO and how they might affect you. I'll talk a little about data protection reform, and I'll set out why I think data protection practitioners have never been more important. And I'll also shoehorn in a few Fleetwood Mac references. What's that about? Well, last September, I appeared before a parliamentary select committee. It was the last stage of the interview process for the role of commissioner. I'd prepared all my brightest ideas and detailed analyses of the privacy and transparency worlds, but the line that most seemed to stick with MPs and commentators that day was when I quoted Fleetwood Mac. I suggested that the UK could go your own way with a new data protection law and approach in the UK that sat outside of the EU GDPR, and that seemed to engage the audience. If I was going to have the early part of my time as commissioner defined by music, I might have thought more carefully. Perhaps a song by The Fall or Joy Division. Maybe She's Lost Control of Her Data. But I could have done worse than Fleetwood Mac. Although today, I reckon Hot, Hot, Hot is probably more on the mark. Anyway, crucially, I learned today that the British love a musical reference. So I'll drop a few into the talk today, see if you can spot them as we go through. I certainly stand by that go your own way point. The GDPR is not beyond improvement. And the proposed data protection reforms, which were laid before Parliament yesterday, strike a good balance in making improvements. The bill reflects an understanding that there are areas of red tape for business that can be reduced, while acknowledging the value of protections that give people confidence to use the products and services that power the economy and society. There's still detail to be finessed within the bill, of course, but it is clear that the UK can go its own way. And so can the ICO. I know a lot of you will have followed the announcement of our ICO 25 plan last week closely. I set out a vision of the ICO I want you to see in 2025, and we've published a plan of how we plan to get there. I spoke about the ICO being a regulator who empowers, empowering people to confidently share their information to use the products and services that drive our economy and society, empowering organisations to use information responsibly and confidently to invest and innovate, and empowering people to hold government to account, driving transparency that helps us all better trust in the decisions taken by public bodies. ICO 25 is a clear plan of how we achieve that. It sets out our priorities, the work we will focus on, and the work we'll set aside to free up the capacity we need to make a difference. If you haven't seen our report, I'd urge you to take the time to read and absorb it. It's a plan informed by this community, and we don't want you to help, and we want you to help us further by contributing to our consultation. Don't stop sharing your feedback. If you saw the ICO 25 launch last week, you'll have seen that point about us listening in the video that played at the start of the event. One of my priorities when I joined as Commissioner was to meet people and better understand what challenges you faced and what I could do to help. I hope that those of you who contributed in some way, whether meeting me or my team or filling in our survey, recognise some of your thoughts in the ICO 25 report we've published last week. To give an example, people told me about the value of the ICO's advice and guidance, but others wanted to see improvements. I particularly recall speaking with people in Edinburgh and Belfast who wanted more templates, case studies, checklists, and the like. So that's what we're going to produce. Our action plan sets out an intention to publish more tools, create a database of recommendations made following complaints, and publish our own training. More on that in a minute. And we'll produce a guidance pipeline too, to give you the clarity of what support you can expect to see in the near future. Likewise, you said that the ICO could do more to connect DPOs with other members of the DPO community, to share expertise and experience. I hope the networking aspect we've added to this year's conference acts as a first step in that direction. We're establishing a cross-Whitehall senior leadership group to drive standards across government. And you'll see in the ICO 25 report our commitment to create a forum for organisations to discuss and debate compliance and best practice. And many of you across the UK raised the time it takes us to resolve complaints. You wanted a quicker process and clearer timelines around our handling. I hope you see that reflected in the ICO 25 plan and our performance standards that we are proposing. I've talked so far about the ICO, how we're listening, how we're changing the support we provide. So let me shift now to you, the data protection professional. Let me start by saying that rumours of your demise are overstated. On my listening tour, I heard concern from some that changing the legal requirements for having a DPO, as the proposed reforms do, makes your role less important. I don't see it in that way at all. Understanding data protection remains a fundamental part of any modern organisation. Understanding not only what the law says, but also what that means in practice and how it relates to your customers, staff, and stakeholders remains a specialist job. The privacy professional is the eyes and ears of an organisation in that respect. You are the ones who best understand what any innovation around data will mean to customers. There's no substitute for that. And from what I've seen, this community is serving the UK exceptionally well. And I have seen from the listening tour the amplification effect and value of various DPO networks in sharing knowledge and making efficiencies. One area where we could improve, and I include myself in my office here, is whether we are listening to all customers. We have a tendency in privacy to talk about people. What do people think if we use their data in this way? How shall we let people know about this change? But the reality is that lots of groups with very different views and needs make up any audience. Think of yourselves. You're a data protection professional, but you may also be a parent, a member of a sports club, someone with a specific health need, a consumer of mental health services. If we're going to bring the benefits of data-driven innovation to all, then we must involve all in the conversations we are having. We need to make sure more people are aware of their rights, and we need to be listening to the challenges that those communities face. I think this will be one of the great areas of focus for our profession in the coming years. And there's more on the role my office will play in the ICO 25 plan. Also in that plan is how we will make your work easier and more effective. That's the driving force for the plans in the coming years. I've challenged my team to save business at least £100 million across the next 3 years. What that means in practice is the ICO making the lives of data protection professionals easier, offering greater certainty in what the law requires, coupled with the predictable approach to enforcement action that allows businesses to invest and innovate with confidence, and flexibility to reduce the cost of compliance. The training materials we're publishing on our website today are a case in point. At the ICO, we need our staff to be expert in what the law says. And so when new staff join, they're signed up to training on the laws we regulate. That training is great. It's written by subject experts to enable more subject experts. But the community of subject experts outside the ICO needs to be bigger than ever. And so we're publishing our materials for everyone to use. This will help you as you train new staff. So why don't you go to our website, click on that link, and email the training modules to everyone in your organization. Encourage them to find an hour or two over the coming sunny weeks to improve their expertise and awareness. The information is all there on our website at ico.org.uk/training. It'll help your organization, but crucially, more data protection experts means more people safeguarding and empowering people by upholding their rights. The chain continues. I'll draw to a close there. I hope that setting out my hopes and dreams for the future of the ICO has inspired and encouraged you. I hope you've enjoyed the multiple Fleetwood Mac references. I never managed to fit in a reference to Tusk, despite my best efforts. And I hope that in the fantastic agenda you have ahead of you today, you recognise the kind of practical advice and support that I've spoken about the ICO providing across the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I hope people enjoyed those messages. Unfortunately, I am told we have now reached the statutory limit on references to Fleetwood Mac, and further references may result in enforcement action. But seriously, some great messages there on Twitter. A comment there that tools and templates is good news, and a few go your own way mentions there. Now, we're very lucky to be handing over to our guest keynote speaker, Marcel Boo, Chief Executive of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. Marcel has been in post since September 2021 and has a wealth of experience in the public sector, not least as CEO of the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, better known as IPSA. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage, it's Marcel Boo.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm afraid I've got no references to Fleetwood Mac in what I'm about to say, or indeed any other popular music combo, I think is the expression. No, I'm really, really pleased to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm grateful to the Information Commissioner's Office for this opportunity to talk to you at your annual data protection conference, and also thank you for all the important work that you're doing in your own areas. I'm here to talk to you today because as Britain's equality regulator and the National Human Rights Institution for England and Wales, we here at the Equality and Human Rights Commission use our legal powers and influence to protect, enforce, promote equality and human rights law and standards. Privacy obviously is subject to its own legislative framework, but the right to a private and family life is also protected under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights and enshrined in UK law in the Human Rights Act. It ensures that, quote, nobody should be able secretly to watch what we're doing, read our private letters, messages or emails, or listen to our phone calls without a good reason. I'm sure that rings many bells. So it's a crucial part of the work that we do, as well as the work that you do, and part of our relationship to the state as well, our community more broadly. So it's important that we all understand the role that we each play to ensure that personal data, including yours and mine, is collected and used lawfully and appropriately, and that this fully complies with human rights standards. And obviously, this is more important than ever in the digital age. The digital technology that we all use provides loads and loads of opportunities for us all, such as online conferences like this. But it also poses threats to the protection of personal data, as I know you know. And so it's critical that the human rights and freedoms of everyone are respected and protected and fulfilled too. And I know that everyone in this conference will be doing your best to ensure that this is happening and that you will be as concerned as I am when it's not. So we here, as Britain's equality regulator, we tell people to collect good quality data and evidence to be able to understand equality and human rights issues. Yet we're also clear about the need to collect and process the data in a way that respects privacy. Just last month, the UK government responded to the consultation on reforms to the UK's data protection regime. We want to see how this develops, particularly the proposals to create a data ecosystem for the public sector to facilitate the use and sharing of personal data and AI and machine learning, all important developments. And we also want to ensure that any new data protection framework in the data reform bill provides adequate protection and meets human rights standards. So we here at the Equality and Human Rights Commission have all of these issues in our sights. In fact, in April, we published our latest strategy for the next 3 years to 2025, where a key priority for us is to address the equality and human rights impacts of digital services and artificial intelligence. And I'll just give you a brief overview of some of our planned work to see how it interfaces with your own activity. One, for example, we want to tackle online harms, including bullying, discrimination, and abuse, particularly experienced by people with protected characteristics. These are characteristics protected in law, like your sex, your race, and your sexual orientation, disability, and age, etc. We know there are some data gaps about the levels of bullying and discrimination online. We want to safeguard the right to freedom of expression online too. So we're advising Parliament about these issues as it debates the Online Safety Bill, which is now going to come back to the House after the summer. We want to improve the understanding of how the Human Rights Act applies to the use of new technology, particularly in terms of privacy, surveillance, and the use of data. That's because it's vital to ensure that rights and freedoms in this digital age are clear. So we're also advising Parliament on reforms to the Human Rights Act. We also want to ensure that people understand how the 2010 Equality Act applies to the design and the use of automated decision making, and how discrimination, including through algorithmic biases, can be identified and challenged. So we're working with experts and regulators like the ICO to embed fairness and equal treatment in the design and operation of systems and services, such as in local authorities or in agencies of government. We also want to reduce the barriers to accessing digital services for people with protected characteristics. Many service providers in both the public and the private sector now have a digital by default policy, all very right and proper. But we also need to support them to understand how digital exclusion affects people and how to use technology to make services more inclusive, particularly for people protected by the characteristic of age, older people, and disability too, for people who can't access information online in the same way that others. And finally, we want to ensure that the law is updated in line with the development of new technologies so that everyone is protected from discrimination and breaches of their rights. So we're going to identify gaps in the law and work with Parliament, with the ICO and other stakeholders to address them. And so, to this audience of experts, I'd just like to focus a bit more on two high-risk areas where we see particular opportunities and threats. The first is embedded bias in AI. As you know better than I do, AI is transforming the workplace from recruitment and task allocation through to monitoring performance. It's also becoming increasingly commonplace across society, particularly as a result of the shift to remote working through the pandemic. So it's in this vein I'm very pleased to see the ICO's announcement last week that they'll be looking at the impact of AI in recruitment, and we'll obviously work with the ICO on that issue to make sure that nobody is disadvantaged by their protected characteristics when they're trying to get a job. AI in the workplace has brought lots of benefits, including increased efficiency and productivity. But there is also evidence that AI can perpetuate bias relating to sex or race, simply because it relies on existing data where there may already be entrenched inequality. For example, algorithms used in recruitment trained on data drawn mainly from men's CVs can lead to discriminatory outcomes for women. Research on the use of algorithms for targeted job adverts can result in young women not seeing ads relating to science, technology, engineering, or maths, and Asian men being more likely to be shown adverts for taxi driving jobs than other occupations. This is compounded by a lack of diversity in companies working on AI in many cases. But employers and service providers may not be aware that their use of AI may open them up to claims of unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act. So this lack of transparency about how and when AI is used in the workplace also creates an obstacle to workers being able to enforce their rights. So we think that employers should be more transparent about how and where they use AI and the steps they're taking to ensure that they're compliant with equality law. For public organizations in particular, they have a duty to comply with what's called the public sector equality duty, which requires them to embed equality considerations in their decision making. So we're helping data practitioners to find solutions to these problems by producing guidance on the duties on public bodies and the use of AI. We're going to publish some more guidance next month, and we'll send a copy to the ICO, and all of you who've signed up to this conference, do make use of it so that you and those you work with can take into account equality considerations when you are conducting your own data protection impact assessments. The second high risk area is the growth in digital by default policies, which I mentioned earlier. In 2021, 6% of the adult population was considered to be digitally excluded. That's about 3 million people in the UK. They were mainly older adults, but also, as I say, many people with disabilities too. We need to support service providers to understand how digital exclusion affects these people and how they can use technology to make their services more inclusive. We know, for example, that 58% of disabled people with mental health problems already encounter barriers when interacting with service providers. The Financial Ombudsman Service has expressed concern about the impact of the move to online services for these vulnerable customers, particularly during the pandemic. And so we're working with the Financial Conduct Authority and regulators such as Ofgem in the utility sector to find ways to address these issues using our collective legislative powers. Finally, before I end, I just want to say one word about the importance of good quality data to address inequalities. You know, I'm sure that one of the things that we do here at the Equality and Human Rights Commission is enforce gender pay reporting regulations. These require larger companies and public bodies to report annually the gap in pay between men and women. We've seen 100% compliance, I'm pleased to say, over the years, and an increasing recognition among employers that data is fundamental not only to understanding their workforce as well as their customers, but to taking action to improve fairness, opportunities, and outcomes for their staff, including people with protected characteristics. So in addition to gathering data about sex and gender, we encourage employers to improve data collection on disability and race too. Some private sector employers do this already, and I was delighted to attend an event with some 14 FTSE 100 companies recently who are doing this very, very well indeed. Some employers are understandably worried about handling such personal data and the data privacy implications of gathering and storing data on ethnicity and disability. And it's true that there are some methodological issues to overcome, particularly for smaller employers. Data aggregation will be necessary, for example. But if we don't know about a problem, such as inequality in pay, then there's not much that we can do to resolve it or enforce the law. So finally, thank you again for inviting me. Thanks for your time. Good luck with all your important work. And please, please consider equality issues in everything you do so that your policies and your practice are fair, inclusive, and protect people's privacy rights. Look forward to working with you, learning from you too, as we all face these data challenges ahead. And I hope you have a good rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcial. That was very interesting and food for thought. A great point there on the needs for rights and freedoms to be clear in the digital age, and the need to reduce barriers for those with protected characteristics. Indeed, there's some feedback there on social media that liked Marcial's point about the digital divide and the issue of digital exclusion and the need to protect against discrimination. So we have one of Marcial's colleagues, one of the DPOs from the EHRC, Lauren Caldwell, who'll be on our DPO panel with John Edwards a bit later on. Okay, so I hope everyone is coping with the heat. I've got 2 fans going here. We're going to have a short break now. So if you have a Mr. Whippy van outside, run. You've got time to make it, and we'll join back at 10:25. Thank you.